The biggest advantage to believing in God is that you don't have to understand anything. No physics, no biology. I wanted to understand. Those are the words of Nobel Prize winner James D. Watson, who, along with Francis Crick, discovered the double helix at the core of DNA understanding. This is This Week in Atheist History. I'm John Rafferty, President of the Secular Humanist Society of New York, and an active and proud member also of New York City Atheists, which is producing this show. We, each week, consider dates in atheist history, birth dates of free thinkers, sometimes their death dates, important court decisions or burnings at the stake, or other events in history which have to do with atheism, agnosticism, humanism, secularism, rationalism, skepticism, you name it, we got them all. At any rate, what we're doing this week, because it's this week, is looking at some people who made names for themselves in the world and who are also atheists during this first week in April. James D. Watson, along with Sir Francis Crick, as I've mentioned, was the discoverer of the double helix back in the 1950s. Dr. Watson became a director of the National Center for Human Genome Research in 1989, launched the worldwide campaign to map and sequence the human genome, and is an outspoken unbeliever who considers that human progress has been shackled by the idea of divine fate and that human beings should do their utmost to improve the future. He lost his faith as a young man. As he said, as a young man, I came to the conclusion that the church was just a bunch of fascists who supported Franco. I stopped going to Sunday mornings and watched the birds with my father instead. His book, The Double Helix, by the way, I should have mentioned, was one of the first best-selling science books ever, and is still very much in print and still very much used in colleges and high schools throughout the world. Every time you understand something, he once said, religion becomes less likely. Only with the discovery of the double helix and the ensuing genetic revolution have we grounds for thinking that the powers held traditionally to be the exclusive property of the gods might one day be ours. That's Watson looking forward to the day when we would be able to manipulate DNA, when we would be able to rearrange the sequence on the double helix and eliminate disease, prolong, like most really intelligent non-believers, does not depend upon God and doesn't understand why anyone else depends upon God for morality. I think the morality comes from human nature, he said. I think we were born to care for one another. It gives people pleasure to help one another. And that's absolutely true. We do enjoy helping one another. James D. Watson, born April 6th in 1928 in Chicago, Nobel laureate, free thinker, atheist, and one hell of a guy. Born in 1588 on April 5th was Thomas Hobbes, the philosopher who is best known for describing life as nasty, brutal, and short. But Hobbes contributed a great deal more to free thought and to philosophy in general than those few he published De Cive in 1642 and Leviathan in 1651. Leviathan is one of the seminal works in modern philosophy, in which Hobbes proposed that the idea of a social contract was necessary for civil peace. Its analysis of religion brought charges against him of atheism, which was then punishable by death in England. And so when things got too hot in England, after Leviathan was published, Hobbes took off for Paris. After the Great Plague of 1665 in England was followed by the Great Fire next year, religionists sought a scapegoat. Hobbes was convenient. And Parliament once more targeted Leviathan for being heresy. And Hobbes, who had come back from Paris, burned most of his papers. But his writings existed in many other hands and in different forms, both published and private. And his writing helped to give birth to the Enlightenment by analyzing and questioning religious assumptions and proposing that religion was created by humans, an idea which has since become fairly well accepted throughout among intelligent people. Hobbes attributed, quote, opinions of ghosts, ignorance of second causes, devotion to what men fear, and taking of things casual for prognostics, consisteth the natural seed of religion, which by reason of the different fancies, judgments, and passions of several men have grown up into ceremonies so different that those which are used by one man are for the most part ridiculous to the other. Superstition and fear leading to rituals which become religion, and different ones by different people, and they all come from the same basic beginnings, but by the time they become rituals and religions, these people think these people are crazy for believing what they believe, and vice versa. He was probably a covert atheist, and certainly at least a deist, anti-clerical, anti-Puritan, and anti-Catholic. And he, nevertheless, in spite of Parliament chasing him, the public despising him, he lived for a full 91 years because he had influential friends. Again, on his analysis of the differences in religion and the way they grow, he said, seeing there are no signs nor fruit of religion but in man only, there is no cause to doubt that the seed of religion is also only in man. And later, fear of power invisible, feigned by the mind or imagined from tales publicly allowed, equals religion. If not allowed, it's superstition. Today, many people in America, let's take where we live, many people think Scientologists are crazy screwballs, that Mormons are nuts. But they cling to their own religion, which says that a man turned water into wine, that he walked on some other water, that he raised people from the dead, that he touched people and cured them of leprosy, that he himself rose from the dead. But that's not crazy, right? Because that's accepted. That is a tale, what Hobbes would call a tale publicly allowed. Mormons, Scientologists, Raelians, and others, that's not allowed, so that's superstition, or what we today would call cult. They that approve a private opinion, he said, call it opinion. But they that mislike it, call it heresy. And yet heresy signifies no more than private opinion. And that's the point about religion, that it is private opinion. My opinion is that I don't buy any of it. People who do buy it, fine. Live your life. I couldn't care less. But Don't force your opinions on me. Don't force your opinions into the schoolroom of my grandchildren. Don't try to make my government bend to your will. Okay, enough. A lot closer to home for all of us here than Thomas Hobbes in the late 16th and early 17th century, Marlon Brando. Marlon Brando, Academy Award-winning actor, one of the most popular actors of the 20th century in the United States and all around the world, was an atheist. Simple as that. He never wrote a book called I Am an Atheist, but late in his life, when tragedy intervened in his own life with the trial of his son Christian for shooting Christian's sister's boyfriend, although that's irrelevant, except for the fact that Marlon Brando had to testify in court. He went in, he was offered a Bible and the standard swearing-in ceremony, and he said, "I will not swear on God. I will not swear on God because I don't believe in the conceptual sense and in this nonsense. What I will swear on is my children and my grandchildren." I'll buy that one. That's Marlon Brando, born April 3rd, 1924, unfortunately died in 2004. However, at the age of 80, certainly not a kid when he died. And a man I admire him not only for his talent, but his girth. So, Marlon Brando, he's in the tribe with the rest of us. Who we got next? One of the big ones. On April 2nd in 1840, in Paris, Emile Zola was born. Now, Zola never actually sat down and wrote, among the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of words that the man wrote, he never wrote, "I am an atheist." However, that didn't stop the conservative and reactionary press in France from calling him an atheist all the time, and he was certainly anti-clerical, anti-church in a country that was 99% Catholic. Zola, as a young writer, supported himself as a clerk, and the legend even has it that he was so poor that he put breadcrumbs on his windowsill so that he could trap birds to kill and eat. He moonlighted as a political reporter and a critic, and but he lost his job when he published his first novel, Thérèse Raquin, in 1867. It was a notorious book which spoke about human emotions rather candidly, although not sex. Mid-19th century, nobody could do that. But by the time his most famous book to that time, L'Assommoir, The Drunkard, was published in 1878, Zola was the most famous writer in France. And then, but he picked up his political ideas again. Now that he was a famous writer, he was able to communicate his ideas, and his writings became more political. His book, Germinal, in 1885, was about conditions in a coal mine leading up to a strike. And then Nana, in 1880, examined sexual exploitation. And I remember my father saying to me when I was about 16, "What the hell are you reading?" Because he had picked it up when I had put it down at one point and started reading it. But my old man was okay. He was not happy with it, but he let me read it. But the most important work that Zola did in all his life was not between hardcovers, but his open letter published in the newspapers, J'accuse, I accuse. Um, Alfred Dreyfus, a Jewish army officer in the French army, was falsely accused of spying. The right wing in France had been looking for a scapegoat to explain why the French lost to the Prussians in the War of 1870. And for years, of course, the right wing was looking for a Jew. They found him in Dreyfus. There was absolutely no evidence. They picked a Jewish officer out of the crowd, so to speak, and accused him of being the spy that turned over all of France's secrets to the Prussians, although Dreyfus never had any chance of actually being privy to those secrets, whatever they were, if they were. At any rate, the Dreyfus affair, the most notorious political affair of the 19th century in France, was a cause célèbre, as they say, and the facts be damned. People just lined up on the right and the left and screamed at each other in the newspapers, in the courts. Dreyfus was convicted. He was stripped of his rank, cashiered from the army, and then Emile Zola wrote J'accuse, and an open letter that accused one politician and one military man after another in the French establishment of having either manufactured evidence or simply lied in court to convict Dreyfus. And the charges stuck. Dreyfus was eventually, years later, after serving a long term in prison, was eventually cleared. But, as Zola said, when truth is buried underground, it grows, it chokes, it gathers such an explosive force that on the day it bursts out, it blows up everything with it. The truth, he said in J'accuse itself, is the truth is on the march and nothing shall stop it. And eventually, Dreyfus, as I said, was cleared. However, the division in French society lasted through the Second World War into the late 20th century. People were still arguing Dreyfus and anti-Dreyfus, Zola and anti-Zola. Emile Zola, a free thinker, a political activist, an anti-cleric, a man who shook, born in 1840, a man who shook up the very foundations of French society, and a free thinker. Oh Lord, please don't burn us, don't grill us, or toast your flock. Don't put us on the barbecue, or simmer us in stock. Don't braise or bake or boil us, or stir fry us in a wok. Oh, please don't lightly poach us, or baste us with hot fat, or don't fricassee or roast us, or boil us in a vat. And please don't stick thy servants, Lord, in a rotissemat. Eric Idle. The songwriter and silliest member of the Monty Python group, and born in 1943 on March 29th, and one of not only the actors but one of the writers in all the nonsense that the Monty Python served up in the 1970s. I cannot look at any representation of Easter, and we are just going into the Easter season now, without thinking of the wonderful last scene in The Life of Brian, where the people, the Eric Idle among them, and Graham Chapman, who have been caught up in the nonsense of the Jewish revolt and crucified, and they're all hanging on their crosses, and Eric Idle leads everybody, or the company of the crucified, in the final song, "Always Look on the Bright Side of Life." And they whistle and they sing about the bright side of life as they hang on the crosses. And another song that he wrote, "The Meaning of Life," for the Meaning of Life, the movie of the 1983 movie, which is called "The Galaxy Song," reminding humans of their insignificance. When you consider the enormity of the universe and how our galaxy is so insignificant, and our solar system within that galaxy is so even insignificant, and our world is even more insignificant, and it gets down to us, and yet we think that God did it all for us. Eric Idle, funny, and one of the people who, in his own, one of the members of the troupe, the Monty Python troupe, that in its own way, through fun, through satire, through craziness, did a lot to undermine religious belief in the English-speaking world. I don't think that Monty Python translated very well to any other languages. I don't know, but I doubt it very much. Eric Idle. One more. We got time for one more. On April 7th in 1764, Elihu Palmer was born in Connecticut. Elihu Palmer is best remembered as an ardent supporter of Thomas Paine, who needed some support and some friends when the American public turned against him for his atheist writings. Tom Paine was lionized and loved because of his writings in support of the American Revolution. But after the Revolution and after the American Republic was established, when he wrote The Age of Reason, which was frankly atheist, the public turned against him. Palmer, who was an ex-minister who was now a deist and a lawyer and a successful man, was able to help and support Paine in his most difficult times. Palmer wrote once, "Another important doctrine of the Christian religion is the atonement supposed to have been made by the death and sufferings of the pretended Savior of the world. And this is grounded upon principles as regardless of justice as the doctrine of original sin. It exhibits a spectacle truly distressing to the feelings of the benevolent mind. It calls innocence and virtue into a scene of suffering and reputed guilt in order to destroy the injurious effects of real vice. It pretends to free," we're talking about the atonement by Jesus on the cross, "it pretends to free the world from the fatal effects of a primary apostasy," Adam and Eve, "by the sacrifice of an innocent being. Evil has already been introduced into the world, and in order to remove it, a fresh accumulation of crimes becomes necessary. In plain terms, to destroy one evil, another must be committed." I think that's about all we have time for this week in history, in atheist history. And so, after discussing Elihu Palmer, Eric Idle, Emile Zola, John Fowles, Marlon Brando, Thomas Hobbs, and Nobel laureate James D. Watson, I think we've covered some pretty good ground. Why not consider yourself an atheist in contemporary history? I'm John Rafferty. This is This Week in Atheist History. And next week, we're going to look at, among others, if we have the time, but certainly we're going to look at the lives of Thomas Jefferson, of a contemporary atheist, Christopher Hitchens, and Tom Lehrer, the songwriter, and the early 20th century very popular American songwriter, E.Y. Yip Harburg, And there are a couple of surprises in Harburg's story. So I look forward to seeing you, or having you see us, next week at this time.
Wherever we once were, we are no longer a Christian nation, at least not just. We are also a Jewish nation, a Muslim nation, and a Buddhist nation, and a Hindu nation, and a nation of non-believers.